Hi, my name is Winslet, and welcome to my video covering the Golem 1.3 patch for Age of Wonders 4. This came out last week, and I haven't had a lot of time to check out the update, but I have to say I am a big fan of the new advanced targeting breakdown. That's something that we'll take a closer look at in a minute. If we take a look at the tweet announcing this patch, there was like three main highlights. They fixed some of the crashes in multiplayer. That's awesome. There's a few places in multiplayer where the game desyncs and crashes you out of the game. So the fact that they're working on that is a really good indicator for the future of multiplayer in Age of Wonders 4. They've added some changes to tomes. They're balancing them a little bit, and then they added beards to dwarf dragoons and berserkers. Very important. Now I like that. It's a good detail to throw in there. Funny detail at the end. So this first section is basically them talking about the holidays and you know, hoping that we are having a good holidays break, wishing us a happy holidays, that kind of stuff, and hoping our Pantheon thrives, right? Um, the first thing the general says added Pantheon loading failed error dialogue. This dialogue helps catch situations where the game is unable to load the expected Pantheon and gives the player a chance to investigate instead of automatically creating a new one. I've never seen this one. It's cool that they're working on little things like this. Um, because that can be very confusing when you do run into error dialogue, but things like that. Next, we have the advanced targeting breakdown setting. This says the setting is found in main combat map. Sets the targeting breakdown to always display split damage and detailed targeting information. Let's go into game to actually check out what that means. All right, so if we look at this unit here, when I go to attack the dragon, it gives me a little bit of information about what I'm going to do and what they'll do to me in response. And I can hold down control to get a bigger breakdown of what is actually happening here. It says that you get Hero Slayer, Fiend Slayer, Dragon Slayer, a Giant Slayer, and a fumble chance on my attack. And then it says when I attack, will bolster the enemy, making it so I deal less physical damage and give them Vessels of Chaos. And if I go into settings here, I can make it so that I no longer have to hold down control basically. Yeah, it's right here at the very bottom. If I go into advanced targeting breakdowns, I can click apply, and it basically means that I don't have to hold down the thing to get this display. It's always going to be up, and that makes it easier to see what's actually happening here. I noticed that when I went to attack with one of these guys, it said I was getting plus 20% from large target, plus 20% damage from, or is that, yeah, damage. I thought it was accuracy for keen side for a second, and that's quite good. No, that is accuracy, isn't it? Plus 20% accuracy from keen sight and large target, because large targets are easier to hit, and then it's minus 20% long range and minus 25% from quick reflexes. When I first read this, I thought it was going to tell me more in the breakdown of my attack, how I was getting 275 damage, because Hero Slayer's plus 40%, and I thought maybe they would also include things like if I'm going to be attacking into bolstering, I might not deal 8 physical damage with all 3 of my attacks. Like, let's go ahead and actually show that. Usually the bolstering will result in slightly less damage. Oh, I grazed there. Oh, it's not breaking it down anyways. Yeah, well, grazes are just going to be less in general. Um, but the idea is that I think it rounded up there. You should deal less physical damage as something's bolstering, which can lead to enemies surviving, and kind of like it looks like the UI is lying to you essentially. So I thought maybe that kind of stuff would be getting addressed with this thing, but I think it's more having to do with that built-in feature, the holding down control to get a breakdown. The next thing in the patch notes is that they added a camera effects setting. Now you can go to the settings and controls for various camera effects that occur during gameplay moments, such as spell casting and critical hits are different now. I think I remember seeing some complaints about it giving people motion sickness. The crits can like zoom in and move you around the map, and I think the same with spell casting. So I think it's really nice of them to include this change for accessibility reasons. The next thing is that they expanded my final form achievement to also count for races that you became the race keeper of. I think that's when you put a lot of enchantments on a particular race. It would only check to see if you're doing that to the race you started with, but if you take over somebody else's, then you become their keeper, and they wanted to allow the final form to be achieved through those means. Next, we have some changes to the AI. They improved the AI tome picking to account for hybrid affinity tomes. AI rulers would only focus on their primary affinity and therefore would never take a hybrid tome that would match all of their affinities. So you're going to see a little bit more variation in the single player experience. I do remember hearing that they kind of would stick to one affinity, and that made it very easy to predict what you're going to be fighting, and then easy to counter those things, or easier to counter those builds. But I believe those were based off of their personalities, not just their primary affinity, which I guess is tied to their personalities. The they improved AI tome picking to prioritize higher tomes instead of grabbing all the tomes of a primary affinity or a given tier. Yeah, you want to be able to get the highest tier tomes as soon as possible because they have some very powerful spells and units in them. And if you don't have access to that while your enemy does, you're just going to be at a significant disadvantage. So yeah, just picking all the um, nature tomes to get those points is not optimal. It's better to take the higher tier stuff if you're able to through other sources. Next, they said they improved AI mission logic for Ancient Wonders. I think that means that that will make it so that they are more likely to take on Ancient Wonders. It could be that the enemies inside Ancient Wonders behave differently because they do have special combat effects and special maps that could mean that they need to think slightly differently. They also improved AI logic regarding Imperium income. I think I remember seeing that they weren't using their Imperium as quickly as they could be to set up cities and then, get other heroes. Because if you don't have cities, the heroes have higher income, and that meant they were just not getting good levels on their heroes and being as competitive in combat as they possibly could be. Heroes are pretty amazing in Age of Wonders games. They also improved positioning during combat when classing global abilities such as Overchannel, Astral Storm, and Lightning Storm. So I remember seeing with Overchannel specifically, the latest change was making the Wizard Kings run as far away from combat as possible, cast Overchannel, and then not do anything when they could have been attacking enemies and uh, making the fight a lot easier. Instead, they just kind of like removed themselves from the combat. So people were saying Wizard Kings were pretty bad in the latest patch of the game. And this could make it so that you can play Wizard Kings again, or you can trust them in auto combat at the very least. So now we're on to art, where they said they added beards to Dwarf Dragoons and Berserkers. Very important. You can't forget that. Some people want to roleplay with the beards. They also reduced the frequency of the bear roar, which is a new unit, and I always play the game with the audio on low or off, so I never heard this, but I could see that getting kind of old if you had a bunch of bears that just like roaring every few seconds and you don't hear anything else. They removed blinking eyelids from the Whiteborn transformation because that could be kind of weird, I'm sure. I don't remember ever seeing that, but I don't look too closely at the aesthetics. I'm mostly here for the mechanics. Preserving Diplomat and Protective Sage personalities have had their icons swapped, which is a pretty minor thing, but I could see how maybe the icon doesn't indicate that a diplomat wants to be friendly, um, or they want to trade with you versus they want to protect you, because trading is slightly different than economic or military support. Yeah, economic support is different than military support. They have done something with the icons. Icons have been synced for several IP character personalities, intellectual property character personalities. I think that is some of the ones that are from the story missions or story realms. Those are the characters that have been around for a while. It could have been that they had old icons from previous versions of the games, or they switched them on the general personalities that random things get, but they just forgot to carry that over to the like um, traditional heroes, I guess you could call them, or rulers, or Gaudir, if you want to use that terminology. And let's see, next they mentioned something about factions. They changed one of the heroes, one of the Gaudir's personalities, from competitive merchant to erudite sage. That will make them focus more on research, I believe. Research has to do with erudite, or erudite was a term that gave you research, at least in Stellaris. That's what I remember. So yeah, competitive merchant meant that they wanted to make money at all costs, I guess however they can, and erudite sage would be less about like what other people are doing and more about what you're doing. They changed another personality from fanatic isolationist to solitary isolationist. I believe fanatic isolationist would be more likely to go to war to keep people away from them. Whereas solitary would just be like, let's go in the opposite direction from all other players. Multiplayer, they prevented the combat engage screen from opening more than once. I remember seeing that a few times, specifically if other people had other things they were doing. Sometimes it would cause the combat engage screen to come up twice, and I feel like sometimes you'd have to fight the combat twice, or you'd have to set it through auto combat twice when that would happen. They've fixed a hang that could occur to multiple manual combats being active when combat A was still being observed. Well, when combat A was still being observed while combat B was started. Yeah, generally we would all watch combat A in my servers, so we haven't seen this before, but I could see that being a problem if one combat's going on and somebody starts another. That's a lot of things for the game to keep track of at the same time. They fixed a crash in the ruler selection where the selection is opened during a refresh of the lobby. I don't remember ever seeing that before, but that's good. I'm glad they're working on things like that. You don't want to get a crash when you're setting up a lobby. That can slow down the setup quite a bit, and setups can take a while in these types of games. They fixed several events that could trigger an out of sync during combat due to an incorrect flow in the scripts. That would be pretty cool if that keeps us from having that issue that would lead to people seeing different things in combat. Really, really happy to see that they're working on that type of stuff in multiplayer. They fixed a crash that could occur when observing player finished observing a manual combat. I don't know what that's referring to, but I may have seen that before because I would observe a lot of manual combats in my games. There's a few things in here about tomes. So this is where a lot of the interesting changes are. I kind of wish they put tomes a little higher up in the patch notes because this is something that's pretty relevant to a lot of people. The change to specifically disruption wave, I think, makes it something that you could consider allowing in multiplayer games. It was a skill that people were banning in a lot of different multiplayer servers and games because it was very powerful to take away somebody's enchantments for, I think it was 3 turns, and it's combat wide. So some people were suggesting maybe it should only affect units in an AOE. That would make it less powerful, but still incredibly powerful, which would make sense since it is a later game spell. A lot of the later game spells really swing combats very drastically if you get the right conditions to use them optimally. But yeah, let's not forget what they say about Tome of the Summoning. They changed combat spell Arcane Supercharge can only be cast on friendly magic units. Updated the targeting instructions to reflect this. Yeah, I think it used to be able to target other magic origin units like enemies, and I believe with that one you only want it on your friendly magic units, and accidentally clicking on somebody else could be kind of bad. Um, Tome of Astral Convergence, cascading power now lasts as long as spell upkeep can be paid. I believe cascading power was one of those ones that would only last a certain number of turns. I can look that up quickly. So if we go in game, we can see Cascading Power says that whenever you cast a spell in tactical combat, add a stack of Cascading Power to that combat, which means at the end of your turns, a random enemy takes 5 lightning damage for each active stack. I believe a lot of these things can stack up to 5 times, but not past it. That would make sense here. And it doesn't say anything in this tab about an upkeep, but if we go over to minion art, you can see here that there is a 12 mana upkeep, so I believe that this will just stay active as long as you can afford that. Now, the next thing we have in here is a change to a Chaos Tome, a Tome of the Lord of Chaos. Balor Sunder the Earth now applies Sunder Defense instead of Sunder Resistance. Yeah, that just sounds like something that was put into the game files incorrectly. It's pretty easy to just see that word sundered and be like, okay, this is the right effect. But yeah, you want Sundered Defense with Balers because they do a little bit of physical damage, and the Chaos Tree does use a bit of physical damage. So Sundering Defense is not bad for them. Next, we have a change to Materium, Tome of the Terramancy. Combat spell Crushing Earth no longer ignores status effect resistance. So if I remember correctly, Crushing Earth was the one that can kill units, and the fact that it didn't have to look at status effects at all was, or status resistance at all, was pretty good. It meant that you had a fairly high chance of actually taking out a tier 3 for a relatively cheap amount of mana and casting points. And if that doesn't work out, they're stunned, which is like they don't get their action points. They aren't useful for a turn, and maybe it keeps them from getting into position and helping the rest of the army out. So in general, a pretty good spell, and I think that is a really good change. There's a lot of things in the game that just like have a base percentage of happening, and I think when they ignore status resistance, it really kind of trivializes that whole mechanic. And I'd like to see more things interact with status resistance, and less things have this kind of like you just bypass it with a 60% chance. Next, we have the change to Siege Project Great Bombard can now properly be controlled by the player. I believe beforehand it would just kind of be controlled by AI, and you want to be able to choose your targets with things like the Great Bombard because they can tear down walls, making it easier for the rest of your army to actually attack the enemy. So having AI just kind of like shoot in random places could be pretty frustrating. It's also not cheap, it's pretty expensive, and I think all other siege projects are controlled by the player, so now it's more in line with what you would expect. Next, we have a change to Tome of the Reaper. Dark Rites has a change to the resistance bonus. The resistance bonus no longer stacks. The damage bonus already wasn't stacking. So it's just like working as intended now. It could be that beforehand Dark Rites would give you a lot of resistance to magic damage. I'm trying to remember what Dark Rites is off the top of my head, so we'll just look it up here. Dark Rites. It's funny. This thing is very useful for looking up details in game. The in-game encyclopedia does not work quite as well when you're searching things. So yeah, now it's only going to give you the +2 resistance once. If you have a bunch of Reapers, it used to give you a bunch of resistance on your undead, and now it just is +2 resistance even if you have like 3 Reapers in the army. Next, we have a change to the Finger of Death. Now it removes all status effects from a unit before it turns into a zombie. This change also gives full HP to the created zombie. Yeah, so if you were putting a lot of damage over time onto your enemies and then you use Finger of Death, you wouldn't want that to keep affecting your zombie once it's on your side of the combat. So this just makes it so that the Finger of Death is better for the person using it. And I have a feeling that that's something that I typically wouldn't run into too much. I would use Finger Death on a unit that has, I think, like full health, to just try and remove them from the board. Using it on somebody that has status effects or missing HP is kind of seems less efficient. But I can't remember if Finger of Death actually has some other things that it relies on. Yeah, just 60%, and if not, it does that damage. If they die, it turns them into a zombie. Yeah, that's pretty good. And that's all the changes to the tomes. They have some general fixes in here, like they optimize memory caches. Yeah, that's I don't know if I can say much about that. They changed some things with full screen and borderless window. Free cities will now expand by taking things other than farms. That's pretty good. They fixed an issue where the AI would struggle in combat while playing on a passive or low world threat. I hadn't seen that, but I guess that will be better for the balance in the game. The AI will be better able to defend itself. There was something that would make the AI overly conservative with its Imperium income and not acquire new Empire skills. That's what I read earlier. I thought it was more to do with cities. They want them to spend their Imperium on Empire skills. Yeah, sitting on a bunch of Imperium is a waste of Imperium. If you have 1,000 Imperium, you should probably spend it on something. I know you can use it to expand your cities to catch people's armies, but I don't know. That just does not feel optimal. Um, Now they fixed an issue where AI units would endlessly avoid each other. That's pretty funny. Fixed AI using overchannel when spells can't be used. Yeah, why would you overchannel if you can't cast a spell? Um, I guess there's a lot of things that were going on with like units like the White Witches, things for the Dragon Lord's Claw attack. There's some changes to capes, something to the pistol and sword um, animation. Paddle boats are changed a little bit when moving short distances. There's some change to the high culture. Champions now get Twin Awakening. That's pretty good. That's a nice balancing change because Awakening is not nearly as good as Twin Awakening. I believe they used to have Twin Awakening and then they switched around how that support skill worked on Awakeners and other high units. So now you can get a lot more value out of that support skill. Twin Awakening is much better than Awakening. Reavers have some changes. Herring shot can now flank properly. I think that was just something that wasn't entered into the unit's description and it was easy to miss. Pistol shots can now flank correctly. Seems very similar to the herring shot. It's just like a unit that was added in the last DLC, so they had less time to test it and catch things like this. Now we have Castnet can now flank correctly. All three of those things weren't flanking correctly, or I believe they weren't getting the flanking tag, and now they can. I actually hadn't seen that because I have barely played Reaver since the DLC came out. I played it before it came out to test that out and see if I liked it, and it's okay. I like some of the tones, but the culture I'm less of a fan of. Um, there's some changes to diplomacy. If it's an issue where sometimes an empty trade jail would appear in the closed deal step when playing as Reavers. Okay, I hadn't seen that. Fix a crash that would happen sometimes when clicking the Whispering Stone. Return notification. Fixed the grievances when controlling destined conquerors, getting modified by declaration of friendship. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I haven't played this either, so I hadn't seen that. Destined conquerors not providing the grievance if it was picked after justified wars. Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. That's an interesting new civic. I think you get Imperium for conquering enemy units, and there's another interaction with grievances there. They fixed mana addicts, providing additional ranks to non-racial units. I believe that mana addicts was one of the ones that should not impact the other guys. Let's see, mana addicts is minus gain the mana addicted. It doesn't say it right here. All right. Well, yeah, I think that if we wanted to, we could look it up in the cultures, right? Something like that. But I don't think we really need to look into mana addicted. It's where would it be? Destiny traits. Anyways, let's move on to the next one, which was fixed pronouns changing incorrectly. That's important. Wizard King rulers and heroes will now default back to Wizard King Sword and Shield when unequipping Pantheon um, things at the start. Grave Call is now considered a positive effect. Yeah, I think you could dispel it by accident, so that's pretty good. Uh, Grave Call, I believe, is the one that gives you zombies at the end of a turn, and you can get it through the Staff of Eniak, a tier 4 item. Fixed Ice Spider and a bunch of other thingies in the encyclopedia. They're no longer elemental. They fixed the Mage Guild not appearing in the structure construction list as a preview. Um, and a few other things. Yes, the item forge is no longer one turn. That's a massive thing. Actually, I should have mentioned that right at the beginning of the video. Now you're gonna have to wait a little bit to actually forge your items. Not the end of the world, but definitely is going to change the way people have been playing. Yeah, there's not much else here. Fixed issue with the realm still applying things. Realm trades just stressing locals is now mutually exclusive with no free cities. I guess those things both would make it hard for you to interact with independence and maybe would cause some issues if they're both active. Reduce the amount of mountains spawning in certain story realms. I saw some pretty funny screenshots about that, just making it so you literally couldn't expand. You're just in a single province and surrounded by mountains, so the city couldn't expand. Pretty funny. I'm glad that got addressed, but it did lead to some fun screenshots. So it was fun while it lasted. The Prometheus Avenged is no longer um, not triggering after you complete Trial of the Ancients quest and some other things I think from Story Realms. Units fix Quake not putting the unit in defense mode after. That's a pretty big deal. Yeah, now the stone elementals be a lot better. Inspiring presence now only applies to friendly units instead of everyone, so you can use them a little bit more easily. You can get close to enemy units and your units and just boost your guys instead of them as well. Now we have unit rank bonuses not counting for existing unit ranks. I don't remember seeing that before, so I'm not entirely sure what that's referring to. And they fix sieges not breaking when the siege leader is killed through a spell on the world map. Yeah, that's one of those interesting things where a lot of people do some weird stuff with sieges, like break a siege and then um, come back on the same turn and start a siege with different siege projects, but the walls are just torn down already. So I feel like there's still some work that could be done on sieges, but that's pretty much everything they have in the patch notes. And see you around. Have a very merry. What is this? Is that Christmas in touch? That's hilarious. I like it. Sinterklaas. All right, I'll see you around. Have a good one.